planet. They can't compete with Andrew, but they again have thrown a huge amount of time and energy into addressing issues. The most significant thing they've tried to counteract is malaria, and people who maybe follow Facebook or social media will see that Mark Zuckerberg, who set up Facebook, and his wife have decided they're going to put virtually all of their Facebook fortune into eradicating ill health in the next 50 years or whatever. An incredibly sort of ambitious, aspirational thing to do. But this is, what I'm really going to talk about is, yes, these are some of the people you might imagine as being well-known philanthropists, but let's try and dig down a little bit nearer to home. So you'll see the next few slides, and you'll see that we've got the Scott family. Now, for people who've been perhaps in the area for a long time, will know that the Scott family set up provincial insurance. Very sadly, we don't have that business in Kendal anymore. But as a philanthropic family, as a family that decided they wanted to make a difference to the communities in which they lived, I'm just going to flick through a number of the organisations that they were responsible for seeding, and which now still play a huge part in the communities that we live. So, not very far from here, the Brewery Arts Centre. Across the lake from here and just up across from Ambleside, Braithey Hall. People familiar with what Braithey Hall do?
Yeah.
So absolutely amazing youth organisation, not only supporting young people locally, but disadvantaged young people from across the world. Francis Scott and Peter Scott, two of the leading members of the family, both had a huge passion for young people. So that the Francis C. Scott Charitable Trust, based in Kendal, still gives away about between £1 and £1.3 million a year, supporting youth projects across Cumbria and North Lancashire. But they seeded Braithey Hall. And what's great about these organisations and philanthropy, and one of my founding board members was a hugely successful businessman, and his first involvement with charities was with the Community Foundation. He said, Andy, I knew I'd meet really nice people when I got involved in charities. He said, I had no idea though how entrepreneurial they'd be. And these are all organisations that were perhaps seeded with major gifts from a local family and their charitable trust, but which have gone on to do great things. Again, not very far from here, Abbott Hall in Kendal. You may or may not be interested in the visual arts, but actually Abbott Hall tends to hold at least one or more nationally important art exhibitions every year. So not only does it give local people the opportunity to go and see some absolutely fabulous art, but it also brings people who literally get on the train and get in their cars and come and spend a weekend in the area because they want to see what Abbott Hall are putting on. Blackwell, again, even nearer, and these are all under the purview of the Lake and Arts Trust. Before I just hop onto that one, and we'll be very excited, I'm certainly very excited, I think next year when the Steamboat Museum is relaunched and we see what an amazing thing, and that's a local charity. That's something, it's not a local business, but in terms of the benefit to the local community, it's absolutely amazing. And these organisations, not only are they putting on great facilities, but they're also bringing money and people into the area. And then the last one is an example, again, if you may not be interested in Wordsworth, but what an iconic brand, what an iconic resource, and something we're all very proud of in Cumbria. And then we have the Wordsworth Trust there as the receptacle of many of the most important artefacts in relation to William Wordsworth. And certainly I lived in Windermere quite a few years ago, and the number of Japanese tourists, whether it's Beatrix Potter or William Wordsworth, but actually having an organisation that continues to promote his work is really, really important. So this isn't all about the Community Foundation at all, but it's about what philanthropic giving has done to actually create some fundamentally important parts of our community. So moving forward very much in time, and very much moving away from Bill and Melinda Gates, and very much a story of my organisation's involvement in, very sadly, the December 2015 floods. So my organisation works with wealthy people who have grant-making funds, but because we exist to address disadvantage, we can, if we need to, launch disaster appeals. And in 2001, when we were very new, and foot and mouth hit the county, we actually thought, should we do something, can we do something? We launched an appeal and we raised £2.1 million. It took us a month to launch that appeal because we weren't really sure what we were doing or whether this was the right thing to do. We launched that appeal in about 3 hours, so by 8 o'clock, 8:30 on the Saturday the 5th of December, all our online giving platforms were live, our website was live, our board had approved the fund criteria and the basis on which we'd run that appeal, and within 4 days we'd raised £1 million. Because of the power of social media, because of the ability to use media very easily, and we're a small organisation based just outside Cockermouth with 12 members of staff, because we were able to relay very powerful stories about what was happening in the county, we received 37,000 separate donations, and we've raised over £10 million. So I'm very grateful to the Rotary Club, and I'm receiving a cheque tonight for £10,000, which is absolutely fantastic. But going back to the power of philanthropy, when you have an organisation like the Community Foundation that can be a recipient of funds, and then you actually have £10 million, we can start making a real difference, making a real change. So what does that actually mean in terms of spend to date? Well, we've invested over £1 million in community organisations that are supporting people, but also community organisations that were impacted because of flooding. But I and my team were part of all of the both community regeneration and strategic regeneration discussions. So for about a month I was on the phone every morning, dialing into meetings with government, local and national, and it meant that we've been able to invest in literally every type of organisation you might need, like the Citizens Advice Bureau, Age UK, Red Cross, so practical help is on hand. But more importantly, the vast bulk of the money has gone to flood-affected households. So 2,600 families have received getting on for £5 million to date. And philanthropy, you know, people talk about putting money in a bucket. We're about strategic philanthropy, about spending money as well as it possibly can be. So we've still got several £1 million left, which is great because we're already investing in individual household resilience and resistance measures. And we are very confident that we will spend that money and spend it well. But that's just a picture. For those of you who weren't familiar or don't know, the 2015 floods were by far the worst that we've experienced. They're like the 2009 floods and the 2005 floods added together. 5,500 households, 6,500 properties, absolute devastation. And for some families in places like Keswick and Cockermouth, they literally flooded out their homes for the 4th time. Absolutely devastating. So to be able to capture that generosity and those acts of goodwill, it's just incredible. And this is just one story. This is Keith, fascinating guy, really lovely guy. He lives by Booths in Keswick, and he's an outdoor instructor. He's a canoe instructor, but because of where his house is, it floods all the time. We not only did we give him a range of grants to help get back into his home and to sort his home out, and because of where he lived, it was absolutely impossible to get insurance. We put £100,000 into an organisation called Eden Flood Volunteers, who collected a huge amount of donated goods and furniture, and they're still placing those goods and furniture. So his house was actually completely refitted, including some of the domestic appliances through Eden Flood Volunteers. So Keith's just one, like I say, of 2,600 families. And so going back to the power of philanthropy, you know, we can literally receive £1. What was great, one of the back stories to getting up to over £10 million, was the government felt a little bit obliged that people were being so generous, maybe they should chip in. So they actually gave us £4.8 million in terms of match funding. But another thing that we do, and I'm going to challenge you to get involved in something that we've done by the side of Windermere for the last few years, is in Cumbria, because we've got a combination of hard-to-heat homes and expensive fuel. If you're out in the countryside, you can only use oil and coal or electricity to heat your home. It's very rare can you access mains gas. It can be very expensive, and if you're living in a farmhouse or stone-built property, it's incredibly hard to insulate your homes. In a bad winter, 300 older people will die simply because they can't afford to heat their homes and feed themselves properly. You know, and Cumbria, very sadly, is one of the hotspots for what we call excess winter deaths. Now, one of our donors came to me about 6 years ago and said, the government pays me a winter fuel allowance, I'm perfectly well enough off myself, I don't need this money. Can you do something with it? And I said, well, thanks very much, Miles, but you know, at the time, 300 quid or whatever he was being given, you know, there's 10,000 people in field poverty and here's £300. You know, unless somebody's got really good odds on a horse, it's not going to go very far. But we thought, well, let's just throw it out there, see whether people who don't need their winter fuel allowance might like to donate it, and we'll set up an appeal and see what happens. We've now, I think we've raised in excess of £500,000 over the last 6 years. And last year, despite everything else that was going on with the floods, we raised £130,000 and we gave grants to over 1,000 older people. And it's really simple. You know, somebody gets a cheque for £125 or £250 and they just know they can keep the heating on. It's a wonderful sort of peace of mind and a connection. And again, you don't have to have winter fuel allowance. I've raised money, I've donated to that appeal. Anyone can do it, but that was what we do. And I think in terms of the power of philanthropy and the impact in the local community, we're literally helping people stay alive. One of the things we introduced a few years ago is a bit of daftness. And my word, we've had some beautiful evenings. So this is a field above the Lowood Bay Hotel. Beautiful view of the Palmerston Fells in the background. And for those of you who want to, on the 28th of January next year, you can come and join us and be part of our big sleep. So people come and get sponsored. So last year we had about 200 people came. You bring a tent, in theory, to hide in if it rains, and you should, in practice, sleep out under the stars. But we don't go around sort of policing anyone. But it's a real family-friendly event. You see, you have a marquee there. We put on a family-friendly film. We put on this year we had Paddington. English Lakes Hotels are absolutely fantastic in terms of supporting the delivery of it. But that event last year raised £20,000, and it's just great fun. It's just great fun. It really is, and in a good cause. So what I'm going on to talk about now is, I've said at the very beginning, the Community Foundation manages a range of grant-making funds. We support people in their philanthropy. So I'm going to describe some of the funds we've got and a grant linked to that and the impact that it's had. So I will actually just go, as you can tell, I've been reading my speech, but I do actually have some statistics. So 20 years ago, we didn't even have what we called carers organisations, but many of us in the room at some point in our lives will either have looked after an older relative or maybe a family member, and in South Lakeland, the carers organisation supports 1,500 people who would recognise themselves as carers. And it's very great, it's great news that people live longer, but then you have an increase of things like dementia. So you find partners looking after, whether the husband's looking after wives, wives looking after husbands. People really taking on a huge burden in terms of what they do. So carers organisations are really there to support the carers so that they have a break. So the Castle Green Fund, people may have already guessed, is Castle Green Hotel in Carlisle. So the Alexander family very generously started to build a grant-making fund with us, and actually their fund is the Castle Green Fund for Kendal. It's very much a bespoke thing. The hotels in Kendal, the staff are predominantly for Kendal, so most of the grants that they make are in the Kendal and surrounding area. The grant that I want to talk about is they actually paid for some carers to actually have vouchers to have some spa days and massages and stress relief and things like that. You know, and if you're on a low income and you can't treat yourself, but by linking in with your local carers organisation, you can get that help, then it just makes it a little bit easier to go back home and to look after your husband or your wife or whatever, and just know that there's people out there that care for you. So an absolutely lovely, a lovely grant there. The Evening Hill Fund, what I love about, well, it frustrates me, but when I work with philanthropists, in America, people want to shout from the top of the roofs, I am a philanthropist, aren't I clever? In Cumbria, people don't want to let on. You know, I probably had to, really put hand up Catherine Alexander's back to say, well, can we call it the Castle Green Fund? So we have degrees